Amazing. I think we're on. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Chai Chat and Community. This week, we're going to be discussing child and adolescent mental health. I'm in conversation with Manisha, Cassandra, and Alana. I'm going to actually go around the room quickly and get everyone to introduce themselves before we get into questions. Who wants to go first? Someone go first.
I can. I'm Alana, so general psychologist at the moment, but doing a bit of extra training to be specialised in education and developmental psychology, and I currently work in private practice.
Amazing. Manisha?
Yeah, so I'm Manisha. My pronouns are she and her. Realize I haven't added that there. And as well, a mental health professional, did my master's in education developmental psychology. So that's my process of becoming a registrar through that, and also undertaking my PhD, so better understanding how services can collaborate while helping families going through a hard time and support them better. Yeah.
Amazing.
I'm Cassandra. Hi, I did my Masters of Clinical Psychology. I'm currently doing some extra training to get endorsed as a clinical psychologist. At the moment, I work in an early childhood education centre and also in a primary school.
Amazing. And for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Anushka. I am also currently a general psychologist, also doing my training to become an educational developmental psych. I run Umi Psychology and work full-time at a high school as a school psychologist as well. So today we're here to talk about child and adolescent mental health. If you guys have any questions, feel free to pop them through. But essentially we're going to be covering lots of different questions. The impact of COVID, we're looking at what do ed and dev psychs actually do? What do psychs in general do with kids and adolescents? Stigma around parenting, all sorts of different things. So just to start off, I guess, putting the question out there, what exactly what are some of the reasons that a child or an adolescent would come to see a psychologist?
I might quickly start first, I guess, because I work in an early childhood education centre. I work predominantly with kids on the autism spectrum. So if there are concerns or your GP has recommended an early childhood intervention, you would come kind of to the centre, and I guess we focus on trying to target those early developmental stages so kids can kind of catch up in a sense and make, and then develop with that structured, explicit teaching that they may not otherwise kind of pick up as typically developing children might. And then in terms of the primary school that I work at, kids will come to see me. I predominantly work doing cognitive and educational assessments. So if kids are having difficulties learning or there's, for some reason, there's just one thing that they're really struggling with and they think that I often hear from kids, oh, I'm dumb or I'm stupid or my friends are better at this than I am. Sometimes there's just something that we need to, I guess, make sure there's no barrier that we can target or work on for kids. And I approach the assessments in a way of seeing what a kid's strengths and weaknesses are, or the barriers to learning, so that they can feel empowered in what they are good at, what they know they need to work on a bit more. And it's not that they're stupid or they can't learn, it's just that for them learning might look a little bit different. So that's why I would see kids.
I love that. I like that whole explanation of like why kids would be coming in, and the learning's such a big deal, right? I think many years ago it was that you would go to school and if you weren't living up to the standards, it was you're not good enough, you are a little bit dumb, you're not, you'd come out feeling not so great. And now we have so many different ways of measuring learning disorders, difficulties as well, and like how to overcome that. And it does help kids to do better like in school, and not just that but like in work as well later down the track. It's like that. Yeah.
Sorry, I think just understanding as well.
Yeah.
It's not like the kids are often labeled like the naughty kid. It's the naughty kid in class, but it's sometimes they're having a really hard time and that's why they're naughty.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you don't understand the work that's happening in front of you, or you're finding it difficult because you've got a learning difficulty, you're not going to be motivated to study or learn or engage. So, of course, you're going to do everything else under the sun, you know. And I think that's a really big message for like even parents out there. I don't know, Manisha and I come from a Fijian Indian background, and we like, I guess if we had to go back to our roots at home, that's not a thing. We don't really discuss mental health, let alone like learning difficulties. It's very much seen as your kid, there's something wrong with him or her, or she's just not trying enough. Like you don't want to do the work and you don't want to put it in. But I mean, the person could be going through ADHD, they could be on the spectrum, they could, I don't know, they could have dyslexia, dysgraphia, but you would just never know any of those things. And I think it's super important to have that message out there. It's kind of like that. Has any of you guys seen that picture of like Albert Einstein's quote where he's like, is it Albert Einstein? I don't know, where he's like, you can't measure like something about fish and trees, where like a fish's capacity to like climb, I can't remember, but it has like a bunch of different animals lined up. You know what the one that I'm talking about, yeah?
Yeah.
No.
No? Send it to you later. It's got like all these animals lined up, and then there's like a scientist, and he's like to like all of the animals, he's like climb the tree, and like only the monkey can do it because the elephant can't and the fish can't. Yeah. But that's
And you know what, I guess that's the social model of disability as well, where, you know, it's meeting kids where they're at. You know, if you've got a kid that can stand and get that, I think I know what you're talking about in terms of the apple from the tree, and they've got like a kid that is really tall and can easily reach the apple, and then you've got a kid that's short and he can't reach the apple, and he's never going to be able to reach the apple without some supports. But if you give him a ladder, he can reach it. I feel like that's possibly what you were getting at.
Pretty much where I was trying to get at. I feel like you did a better job at explaining it. But it's true. That's pretty much it. So essentially, like being able to come in and see there sometimes around these sort of things when your kid is saying, I'm not motivated at school, I'm not engaging, or like, the teachers are expressing that maybe your child is not behaving properly, or being the naughty kid in class. And this could start from a very young age. Coming to see someone is probably a good idea, because they might just be struggling with different aspects of their life. And I mean, how many people, I guess even amongst us, how many kids have you guys worked with in the past, if we shorten down the time, the last year and a half, where that's been the case? Like, I know that there's been so many kids that I've seen who, once they've, and not necessarily even a diagnosis, just like in some area they're lacking, and we've done assessments and been like, okay, you know what, now I have the tools and the strategies, and they've just shown such a huge improvement in their capacity to do well at like the education side of things.
Yeah, and something that we all learn this as well, and I think it's important for everyone else to know, is when there is challenging behavior, if someone's having a tantrum, or even if they look as if they're being lazy, that there's something underlying happening, and we're providing, there's some kind of support that either they don't have the tools, or we're not providing that support that child or young person needs. It's really important to understand that when we see challenging behavior, trying to figure out, okay, then what's actually happening here for you? How can I help?
It's very rare that a behaviour doesn't serve a function. There's usually always a function to the behaviour, and if you want to address the behaviour, you have to address the underlying function of it. If there's not getting needs met, that behaviour, you might stop that behaviour, but it might just be putting out a spot fire, and something else will pop up in its place.
Sure.
So you really have to find the function of it and what the behaviour serves.
And I think the knock-on effect from that is like it impacts the child's like social and emotional, like, I guess just like everything in the sense of like boosting confidence. Like seeing a child who is feeling so not confident about like, just themselves and interacting with other people because they're feeling stupid or silly or not good enough, and seeing that change is like, I think that's a real winning like sort of space out of all of this, is like once you get help, you're able to like enhance that side of things as well. And then there's that anxiety, the stress, the depression that comes with it when you are feeling like you're not good enough. And so that's another element of how this can like be supportive. Actually, that's another thing I sort of wanted to touch on. Like, Alana, you work in private practice with young children, right? So what's the age gap that you sort of work with, and what's the most common sort of presentations do you see in amongst children?
Yeah, well, my clinics, it's mostly kids and adolescents. So I see kids as young as 5 all the way up to about 17, 18. The majority is normally, I guess, pre-teens, early teens. And we see a lot of autistic kids, a lot of kids with ADHD, anxiety, depression, low mood, that kind of stuff. That's the main sort of areas that we see. But it's also parent work as well. So a lot of what you do, it's not just with the kids, it's working with the parents as well. Because I mean, you might see a kid once a week, maybe, but more often than not, at least where I work, it's once a fortnight, maybe once a month. So it's equally working with the parents to help them take away what we've done in session home as well. So yeah, that's kind of the main areas that I work in. Yeah.
In terms of, I guess, parents, and this is something that I feel like a lot of people aren't aware of, when we have children come into practice, whether if you're at school, in private practice, or otherwise, for the most part, the parent is our actual client. And I think that's something that we don't necessarily tend to address. Like, I don't know whether it's addressed publicly. I know it's hound into us at uni, at a university level. We have to like learn about ethics, and it's like, who's your actual client? And everything gets a bit complicated. But more often than not, it's parents, because the parents are the ones signing the consent forms. So I don't know, I'm finding within my own private practice that you're right, I tend to work a lot more with the parents, in the sense that parents will call up and be like, this is what's going on with my kid. Yes, I'll see the kids one-on-one, but it'll always end in a conversation at the end with the parents being like, this is where we're at, or, you know, have you considered like doing this to support your child at home? And that doesn't matter whether the kid is like 15 or 8 years old, like regardless, we will always have that conversation. Doesn't mean that we'll always tell you, you know, have like, I guess, breach confidentiality, in the sense that if we talk to you exactly about verbatim what us and the child have talked about, but even giving you an idea of like what's going on, and actually identifying what like some of the symptoms might look like. So like how Manisha said earlier, like laziness, what is that actually stemming from?
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, intense anxiety. Like I know a lot of kids who at the start of COVID last year, and I was working in primary schools then, were just so anxious because of the roller coaster ride that we went on, you know, in terms of being at school, being at home, being at school. And then especially my grade 6s at that time were so stressed out because they finally made it to the top of the hierarchy, and then they couldn't see their friends, and they all knew that, you know, the year after everyone was going to go to different high schools, and they were all very nervous about things. I even had one kid trying to like cure COVID in his spare time. Like he'd come in every session and be like, this is what I learned about COVID and vaccines and like God knows what else. And he'd be like, did you know? And I'm like, I have learned so much more from you than I have learned from anything else. But like it was his way of coping, and he was just so stressed out the whole year, bless. But by the end of the year, you know, had learned strategies for managing that anxiety. And I think that's essentially it, right? It's not that coming to a psych, it doesn't mean that you're going to absolutely eradicate all of your emotions. You know, you're not going to stop feeling sad ever or stop being anxious. We're here to provide you with the social, physical, and emotional tools to overcome whatever you're going through.
And
Yeah,
I think that's a really hard thing to sit with, is to know that you're not going to a psych to get rid of feelings, and and
we're not here to fix your kid.
No, it's not. You're kind of setting yourself up to fail, because it's not going to happen. These thoughts, these emotions, they will keep coming up. It's about being comfortable sitting with them, knowing, yeah, I'm going to feel sad, or I'm going to be really anxious, but I've got the toolkit to feel that for a second, get up, move on, and get on with my day, or just move through it and not get stuck in that feeling. And I think trying to get rid of it almost makes it stick that little bit more, because it's like your brain's going, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, got to get rid of it. But if you can sit with it and just move through it, it kind of takes away a bit of its power. And I think it's really important to remember that with kids, especially because as adults, we struggle with that. So kids will often need that co-regulation. Kids won't always be able to regulate themselves. So you need to be able to sit in that uncomfortableness with them, I guess, is it's something I just wanted to kind of bring
no, that's
and
so
touch
true
on.
there.
Yeah.
Do you think Oh, sorry, you go first, Manisha.
Oh, sorry. No, yeah, and I think that there's a lot of research out there that talks about that uncomfortableness and being able to sit into that. A lot of people who are able to do that have a more joyful and their well-being looks a bit better because they have that ability to use those tools to sit in there with their children and have those conversations.
Yes. No, I absolutely agree with both of you guys. And I think, you know what, I feel like parents have this underlying need to make things right with their kids. So, when we're growing up, for a lot of the time, it's like, if you're a good parent, you will be able to solve, and I think this is just like a common misconception. If you're a good parent, you will be able to solve every problem under the sun for your child, and you think that you can. And so sometimes when your kid is going through some extra difficult things, and, let's bear in mind the fact that mental health is still quite, even though we're speaking about it, there's a strong stigma around it. And a lot of people don't know when they themselves are going through mental health issues, let alone when their child is going through stuff. So if you don't quite understand what these things mean and how to support yourself if you were in that situation, supporting your child becomes a little bit more difficult. And I think a lot of the time there comes like this, I don't know, for some parents I've noticed they wash over with like, am I doing something wrong? Or I'm not able to help them. And it almost becomes frustrating. And I see this a little bit more, I think, I don't know, I've seen it across the board with parents, but in the South Asian community, the way that I see it is a lot of parents will get almost upset at their children when their children are upset, because a kid will be like, I don't know why I'm feeling upset. And, this is actually a classic example from one of my teenagers at school. She's 16 years old, comes from, I think, a Korean background. And, she is going through depression, anxiety, eating disorder, doesn't really know how to explain these to her parents. So we're probably going to sit down, do a bit of a conversation with her parents to help relay that information. But one day she was having a panic attack, didn't know why, doesn't know what triggered it. She was probably just stressed out by school. But she was at home, and then her parents tried to sort of be gentle with her initially. But when they were like, oh, but what's wrong? Because you have to have a reason for feeling sad. Like all the time, we have to feel like as if there is a particular reason for us to feel the way that we are. And just highlighting this, if nothing else, if people take nothing else away from this talk except for the fact that it's okay to just feel how you're feeling whenever you're feeling it. You're allowed to feel how you're feeling. You don't have to have a reason. It's fine.
Yeah.
More often than not, there might be an underlying subconscious reason. You don't need to know what that is. You're not overreacting. It's okay. But for her, this particular girl, her parents got upset and angry with her because it was almost like the frustration, like she didn't know why she was feeling that way. They didn't know they didn't know why she was feeling that way. Couldn't understand that it was just, something that she felt, and then so felt frustrated, probably not so much that she was upset, but more that they couldn't support her through it. So it's like, I can't help fix this. And I think as part of that, like there are so many parenting programs, you can go out and then not just to learn about mental health and to come to even forums like this to get a better understanding of things, but like other types of parenting, like what are some programs that you guys have either run or know of?
I haven't
I don't run any. No.
I
worked with
girls with ASD last year.
Pardon?
We did the girls with ASD last year.
That wasn't really a parenting program.
No, I guess we had a parenting component to it. It wasn't like a proper program.
Yeah. I guess I don't necessarily run a specific program, but I work a lot with parents in terms of helping co-regulate with their kids. And I guess like you guys all said, normalizing all those emotions. So a lot of the kids I see have a lot of, or feel big feelings like anger a lot. So I guess it's just normalizing that it's okay to feel angry. We all feel angry. Adults feel angry. Talking to parents about that as well. It's okay that they're angry. They do get upset. They do have these big feelings, but it's how we go about it. So instead of, throwing a chair at the wall or throwing something or hitting someone, what can you do instead when you're angry? So yeah, it's all about normalizing. And I guess something that I like to do is talking through different strategies with parents and helping them show their feelings with their kids. I think you kind of touched on it before, Anushka, but I guess sometimes parents hide away from that mental health or mental health concerns. So for a lot of parents, they don't share their emotions with their kids. They don't say, I'm feeling really angry right now. I'm a bit frustrated with the situation. and they don't talk through their feelings and how they're going to solve that. So kids kind of go in, they're like, I'm angry, I'm going to throw something, or I'm going to hit someone, rather than going, okay, I've seen that when mum gets angry or when dad gets angry, they actually go to their room or they move to a different space away from what's causing them to be angry. So yeah, I guess I don't necessarily use a program, but I like to talk through with parents strategies to co-regulate and to kind of coach their kids through ways to express their emotions in helpful ways. Yeah.
Do you feel like for younger children, especially, like I guess, the environment that they grow up in and the way that parents tend to portray their emotions and feelings and talk about them is probably one of the most influential ways that kids then learn to regulate their emotions, and then that fact carries on into adolescence and then adulthood?
Well,
Definitely.
kids are sponges. Like we know that they're not talking, and then all of a sudden they've got 10, 20 words, and from that it's like a big burst of language. They just absorb what's around them and the environment that they're in. And I think glad you kind of brought up the environment, because that's the number one thing I think that as parents and educators, psychologists, whoever's in the child's life in any sort of a capacity really, is providing them with a safe environment and making sure that if your child does feel angry, whatever it is, that they can come to you with that. Because if they're feeling safe and they know that you can help them hold that emotion, they're more likely to show it to you or express themselves, and you can work through that together. And I think that's where the parent coaching or parent programs come in really handy. It's how can I sit with my child and coach them through it and go through this with them and still make them feel safe and secure, and that they're not going to be in any danger by, there's no flight or fight response kind of going on, and you can hold that with them, because we find that difficult as adults. So imagine a tiny little body with a growing brain trying to do that in an environment where they don't feel safe or comfortable or secure. It's really, really hard.
Yeah, and I think
You go.
sorry, you go, Milana, if you
I was just going to say, I guess that the expectation on kids that they are able to regulate by themselves can be something that a lot of parents want their kids to have. And obviously it's ideal, but it takes time. For some kids, it takes longer than others. So just helping parents understand it's about co-regulating. And that's the base. That's where we start. And then once a child gets to a level where they are able to do that independently, it's working towards that. It's not going to happen straight away. It's not something that can just, you snap your fingers and overnight it happens. It's a long process. So that's something that I work on a lot with parents, I guess, helping them have realistic expectations of what sort of change we can see and how long it might take.
Absolutely. Just on the topic of parents, I wanted to highlight the fact that it is okay for you to come and talk to someone else about how to parent. It's not even how to parent, it's like how to improve your parenting skills, because the number of people that come and see Cass, Manisha, Alana, and I about this is going on with my kids, what more can I do to support them? And we're more than happy to have those conversations, because it doesn't make you a bad parent. It just means that it makes you a better parent if you're willing to learn and grow. I know that there's parenting manuals these days, but in this case, it's not really a parenting manual out there. There's not really a manual out there for knowing your own emotions, how to handle your own unique child. And yes, you're all experts in yourself, but we can definitely support you through that process. It's definitely, and there's a lot of stigma. I think we were talking about this pre-going live. There is a lot of stigma around this sort of stuff,
Yeah, exactly what I was going to say. I think
we've got a question. As a high school teacher, how can I hold space and support my students without crossing personal and professional boundaries, especially in the context of remote learning? Oh, who wants to take that one? It's a big question. How do we hold space and support students without crossing personal and professional boundaries? Wow, especially in the context of remote learning. Look, as someone who's working in a high school, finding this difficult, because kids will honestly at this stage message at such random times of the day or the week. I will check in with some of my children and they will not respond to me for a couple of days, and it'll be something big, or sometimes it's something really small. I think in general, even whether if you're a primary school or a high school teacher, holding space, it's a lot like walking. It's like a lot like what we were talking about in terms of parents, right? It's a language that we use in the classrooms, the practices that we use in the classrooms that can be like used across the board with everyone.
I think being
I
open
think,
to
Cool.
about emotion. Sorry, just being open, like in terms of holding space, just trying to keep neutral language, or because often, like if kids feel that it's going to be a big deal for them to come and tell you something, they may not do it. So I think keeping kind of that neutral affect almost of come to me with whatever. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. If you are feeling a certain way, you can let me know, and if I can't help you, I can help put something in place or find someone that might be able to. So it's not necessarily about, again, it's going back to that, you don't have to fix everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
feel like
that's
it can be a
Oh,
Sorry,
all at the same
sorry,
time.
Alana, because you were actually going to go before. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say when teachers or other professionals get those big sort of topics from students, it can be very, very heavy, and it's almost like, what do I do? Where do I go to? So something that might be helpful if it gets to a point like Cass said that, it's about referring on, kind of chatting through with the student, who do you feel comfortable talking to, and kind of having a few different options so that you feel comfortable as well, that you're able to pass that along, because it shouldn't be all on you either. It can be a very heavy burden to have, especially if you've got multiple students with bigger issues. It could be coming up with a list for them, who's someone at home I can talk to, who's a friend, who's maybe someone a bit more professional, whether it's a school counselor or something like that, just so that burden's not all on you, because it can be a lot in remote learning, especially when you can't see your students and check in on them. Good to know that there's someone at home or a friend or something that can check in as well.
Yeah, Cassandra and Alana, exactly what I was going to say. You don't need to fix it. It's just trying to create a safe space where they can talk to you, and it will be helpful to have that neutral positioning. And finding out who are the best, who are the best supports for them, who can they trust and talk to, and then maybe for yourself as well, preparing for this with your students, finding out, okay, what are some options as well? Do the school provide a wellbeing team, and all that sort of thing, and modeling it as well, like parents can model it, modeling if there are really tough emotions, helping children understand them. And I know they do a lot of work like that already in schools with social emotional, which is fabulous.
fantastic. Yeah, totally agree. I think a really big part of this is to use the language, right? We don't really use the language around mental health, and just sort of normalizing that can make a huge difference as well. I'm not saying talk about your personal experiences, but letting kids know that it's okay to feel anxious about things, because everyone gets anxious. I get anxious, other teachers sometimes get anxious, mum and dad get anxious. Letting them know that it is quite normal. One of the other questions up here is what kind of feeling words would you tell children to use when they're not feeling well? So, how do we encourage kids to talk to us when they're feeling a bit down, and what kind of words would we use? And I think I have a follow-up question from there around what are some warning signs that maybe things aren't quite going on okay for your kids?
There's this fabulous, if you ever do a Google emotion wheel, and it comes up with an amazing range of emotions to help verbalize what you're feeling. I guess you could start off simply by, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling angry, and using those kind of words. Just those, trying to just make it normalize to talking about anxiety. I'm feeling anxious. Okay, if I'm feeling anxious, then what are some strategies that I can do, or who can help me bring me to a space of calm?
And I guess pitching it to at the age of your child as well, like a 2-year-old who's verbal and has words might not have, I'm feeling anxious about this, or I'm feeling really worried. Like they'll have very, very base level words. So happy, sad, angry, those kind of are the three main ones, and then, pitching it there and then building on that as they age, and kind of figuring out where where their knowledge of emotions is at the moment, and then pitching it there, and then maybe expanding on it at that level, but just trying to find that base level first and moving through them. And I guess as well, just helping kids to recognize when I'm anxious, I have a sore stomach, or getting them to realize physically in their body what those emotions feel like, because then you do see kids, and at primary school, and I'm sure high school as well, is they don't want to come to school because they've got a tummy ache or they've got a really bad headache, which won't all the time, but it may be that they're really anxious about something, and recognizing that some kids, if they haven't learnt that early on, when they get through the schooling years, they don't recognize that my sore tummy means that I'm anxious. So I guess building that from when they're really young, and kind of getting them to recognize and check in with their bodies and how their body's feeling when they're sad or when they're angry, whatever it is, will then help them later down the track. It's kind of building those foundational skills.
And
I think that's so true. Oh, no.
I was just going to say, just going off what Cass said, I think it's also really important to not have, I guess, take it as it comes in terms of kids' levels of understanding emotions. You might have higher assumptions of their sort of emotional vocabulary than what they might actually have. I work with a lot of kids, and sometimes, you use emotions and, you talk about it, and then they go, what's that? Or I don't really know when I feel that, because they don't really understand that emotion that well. So sometimes it's about taking a step back. And I guess, so there's no strict language that I use. Sometimes it's, reading books or watching YouTube videos, doing stuff about their interests or shows they like, and then kind of talking about ways that those characters might feel. I even sometimes, relate it to colors. So obviously a lot of schools do zones of regulation. So they use the 4 colors to identify some different emotions. But even just other colors that kids might relate to. And so you might play a video with them, and there's an obviously angry character, and just labeling that as a certain color, and then helping kids understand emotions. Sometimes you need to use more unique or specific ways to do it. And sometimes it's not even using big words that we use. It's kind of just breaking it down and kind of going to their level as well.
You've reminded me, there's that fabulous, what's it called, Inside Out, if you're not sure where to showing kids.
Great movie.
Love it. It's amazing, and it helps us understand that being sad, it's okay, we need to feel it. So that's a really great place, to, if you're not sure where to start with talking about emotions, you could use that movie. Yeah. And
there's a good YouTube video, I can't remember what it is, but I actually use it, and it kind of breaks down emotions as well a bit more in a short little video that you can use to help kids understand different emotions as well. Yeah.
There's actually so many resources out there around this sort of stuff, but like videos, movies, links, and like Alana mentioned, we use such, I don't know whether they're becoming more conventional now, but to use these type of resources in therapy isn't uncommon. Like, this is some of the ways that we teach young people how to identify how they're feeling. I mean, as someone who works primarily with adolescents, kids will get to that age between 12 and 18 years old and still not be able to identify how they're feeling, because they never learned the language for it when they were younger. And they do present very much physical symptomology when they come into like sessions. So they'll be like, oh, I'm feeling, I wake up and I feel nauseous in the morning, or I don't know why I keep getting headaches, or my tummy's always sore, or like I just don't feel like getting out of bed in the morning. And genuinely, they're probably not trying to skip school. And if they are trying to skip school, it's probably because they're feeling anxious, depressed, or stressed. Like, there's probably a reason behind it. And the reason behind those feelings might be something more like we were talking earlier, the learning difficulties. It could be that they're being bullied at school. It could be that something bigger is happening. And encouraging your kids that conversation around this stuff is okay, and you are allowing them to have that space for them to speak about it. And that's the thing, right? As a parent or as an older sibling or someone who is just surrounded by other children or adolescents, existing is enough. Exist in their sphere and just listen. Sometimes that's all they need, hit pause on TV or your work or whatever it is, and just listen to them for a little bit, and take it seriously when they do tell you that something doesn't feel quite right. And even if you're not able to solve the problem, like Cass and Alana and Manisha mentioned earlier, you don't need to solve the problem. It's okay. You know, you can work on it with them to find other sources who can support them with that problem and work through it. And these days, you know, especially in Victoria, we've now got funding to have pretty much therapists everywhere. Like, one of the role that I'm part of is a role that's been rolled out into high school, where a mental health practitioner has to be almost at every high school by the end of, I can't remember when, but that's something that the government's doing. So there should be therapists at almost all high schools. There's usually a therapist in primary schools that comes in, if not every day, then a couple of times a week, getting in touch with, you know, the principal. You can find out a lot more information around that. There's people like Cass and Lana who work in private practice and do great work around this sort of stuff. So there's a lot of support out there, which I think it's important to know about, right? Yeah.
Oh, and there's a huge realization now about the experiences of migrant families, and even just within the field of Asian and South Asian mental health. So that's really amazing to see in the last 3 years, and especially during COVID, how there's a push to have these conversations. Conversations. So being here, listening to this live, you know, conversation is a really great place to start. Yeah,
absolutely. Actually, on the topic of COVID, how have your clients presented during COVID? Because I know that the impact of COVID has obviously, like, it's been adverse across the board in terms of mental health for everyone. I mean, as adults, if we're feeling bored, restless, tired, and I'm seeing it in my adult clients where people are just, you know, not being able to stick to routine anymore, waking up very late, having messed up sleep cycles, all of that's happening. What are we seeing in children and adolescents?
We're all waiting. Like, I know. I was waiting for you guys to speak. I was like, I don't want to interrupt anyone again.
Someone go.
I'll go. In private practice, you know, seeing obviously a huge impact on kids, lots more referrals and kids struggling. Obviously, we've been in a huge long lockdown now, but I guess before that, the back and forth between lockdown, returning to school, I was seeing a lot of kids refusing to go to school, and I don't really like that word, but I guess that school anxiety and just having a huge fear about going back, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing how they feel about, you know, their health, safety, especially for kids who, you know, a lot of them know about the vaccinations and aren't eligible for it. So there's a lot of anxiety around, I want to get vaccinated and I can't. I'm seeing a lot of, I guess, that school anxiety. And then another big one that I'm seeing is the social side. So kids aren't really wanting to see friends anymore. There's some kids that are obviously thriving to see other kids and just itching to get back out there. You know, I don't know about you guys, but I see heaps of kids all the time riding their bikes on the streets because they just want to be together. And then I've got other kids that are getting nervous about seeing their friends. They're getting nervous about going back to school and needing to almost relearn some of those skills
social
that they
skills.
Developed. And low mood as well. Seeing a lot of
big time.
Low mood. Yeah.
I think on that stance, from a perspective of someone who does a lot of transition, like I see a lot of transition from primary school to high school. One thing that I noticed was because we went into remote learning almost 2-3 weeks into lockdown last year, our year 7s did not have an opportunity to learn the social skills they would normally learn coming into a new space with like their new peers. So what we found this year is that a lot of the year 8s who went the year 7s from last year are probably not as developed in terms of their social skills as like they should be, because they haven't had that opportunity to spend time together, to build those friendships, those relationships, to go through, you know, the motions of things. So essentially what felt like, I think even just from a therapy point of view, is like we had 2 year 7 cohorts. You know, you've got your normal year 7s who are quite sweet and very looking forward to like school and are feeling a bit nervous about everything. But then you've got your year 8s who went through this weird year of going in and out of lockdowns, not really understanding remote learning, the workloads increase since grade 6, but haven't really built those relationships with their friends and peers. And so seeing them act out a little bit more almost as well has been really interesting. and just like the fluctuations in moods. So I think a lot of the kids that I saw this year that have been, I guess, part of my client list or my kids list at the moment are kids who are in year 8 because they're struggling with all of those. And I'm wondering whether if anyone's seen something similar in terms of, are there any patterns, or like, what are you seeing even in like younger children? Like Cass, you work with childcare, right? So what does that look like in terms of
yeah, little kids 1 to 5, and it's interesting that you say kind of their behavior changes, because I guess on a very 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 simple level, you can really see that with very young kids. And we did have one 3-year-old boy who is quite anxious and would come in and just straight away withdrew from us as adults. He was already very selective about who he was friends with in terms of adults. He had two favorite educators, and even them, if they would come near him, he would just start screaming because he was just so. And this was after our 2-week hard lockdown. So when kids weren't able to come to childcare, he just was feeling very. We thought he was feeling a bit unsafe, a bit uncertain, and that I think the uncertainty of everything has really really had a huge impact on kids. And kids as young as 1, they need that routine, that structure to kind of get through that day and to feel safe. And certainty is safety, and unpredictability, you don't know what's happening, you're in that fight flight mode, and it takes a big toll on kids. And so when we saw him kind of withdraw and just start screaming, the behavior was screaming, and we had to kind of find what was underlying that, and there was that anxiety and feeling safe with people. So we organised like a calm space, like in a corner that he could go to until he was kind of ready. And I guess not forcing that connection either, and like letting kids come to you. The more you try and force it, it almost does the opposite of what you want it to do. So with him, I did a bit of kind of coming in sideways. So I was before the 2-week lockdown one of his favourites. I was very proud of that. So when we kind of came back, and he's 3 and has just started talking, so I got the hand and was go away really clearly, which was hurt a little bit. But I kind of just sat with his peer next to him and was narrating what I was doing with his peer, playing, we're playing Play-Doh, we're doing this, we're having so much fun, and just kind of ignoring him a little bit until he felt comfortable enough. Okay, this is a safe person, they're just having fun with one of my peers. And then I got a cuddle. So he came in. So I think it's about pitching it to it's tailoring it to your child and how they're going to respond. If they are feeling really anxious and unsafe, wait until they feel safe with you before you try and kind of force that connection as an educator or whoever it is. And I guess it's just again, finding the underlying reason for a behavior. Like with young kids, the behavior will be what we see, whether it's screaming, crying, throwing something. Kids don't have a huge repertoire of reactions. As adults, we learn different reactions and different things. I mean, babies, if they're hungry, they cry. They're tired, they cry. If they're wet, they cry. Like they've got one thing. So
as an adult, I wouldn't mind having those reactions though. Can you imagine being 3 and just being able to scream in public like that? Yes. That would not be the worst reaction as an adult. Unfortunately, we can't do that anymore.
And I guess, and then even that though, sometimes with the kind of younger kids, so like the 5, they'll, scream or cry. And if you just sit with them and say, you know what, I'm a bit sad too, or I'm not feeling great today either, they actually, they respond to that. They respond
really well. They really do.
It's like, this isn't a weird thing that I'm doing. This adult also feels like this sometimes. It's, not fixing things. It's sitting with it. It keeps going back to
that active listening and that empathy, being able to sit down with them, and you don't have to fix it, to be like, you know what, this really sucks, I feel this too, not problem solving. It's I just remembered a great little clip by Brene Brown on this that I'll send through on
that'll be great.
That space.
Love that.
And I think that's such an important one, in terms of, those new behaviors that you're seeing that you might not have seen before. I'm seeing it
Yes,
a lot in the
that's it.
primary school, early teens, a lot more, I guess, frustration and aggression. And we know it's coming from a place of anxiety, but parents get stuck sometimes because they don't know what to do with it. And like you guys said, it's sometimes just about sitting with it. It's not trying to get them to calm down straight away. Just let them experience that emotion because they're really upset. And right now they don't have a better way to show it than to get angry. I mean, obviously we want to make sure everyone's safe. So get in a safe space, whether it's getting some distance from them, letting them just get angry in a space by themselves or go to their room, or like you guys said, just sitting with them, be like, this sucks. I'm upset too.
It does suck. Sometimes,
let's be sad.
We are in a time right now, everyone, where it's a global pandemic. There is not much we can do about it. And honestly, there are some problems that we can't solve. Like, this is an issue that is across the board for adults, adolescents, and children. And we're all probably feeling the same way. And letting kids acknowledge how they feel and just sitting with those feelings, like Alana's saying, is really important, because you know what? If we stop kids from feeling like distress or distraught or whatever, they will learn to do that forever. So that I think that leads to a lot of like repression of feelings. It's something that I see a lot of more in the older adolescents and some young adults that I work with. If they haven't had that opportunity to just express how they're feeling when they're young, as they grow up, they feel like it's wrong to express any feeling at all, and will tend to like just hold everything in and internalize it. And I think that is so much more unhealthy, because it will come out in a burst. Like, it's almost like you're bottling everything up, and then a couple of years later, when they're in like their adulthood, it all just comes out.
I guess I think I wanted to mention, this is so important as well, with now us slowly opening up. It's very important for us to figure out how we can have this conversation, because there is also now a lot of anxiety around, what does it look like when I go out, and socialize with friends, for those that are really scared of COVID. So it's really important to think about it from that perspective as well.
Absolutely. Well, the theme of uncertainty has been so strong, right? Especially during COVID, and just like in lots of different aspects. For example, my kids were freaking out, like, are we going to go back to school this term? And, yes, we've got a bit of a roadmap here in Victoria now, but is that roadmap going to stay the way that it is? I know that my 12s are back this week. I know from the 26th that, we're going to have staggered return, which is probably a good thing. But at the same time, like, is that actually going to happen? And how long will that last, like, before we have to come back to being at home again? Understanding as well as parents that this whole going in and out of lockdowns is very difficult for students who are doing exams, who are studying, who are not sure how VCE is going to be impacted, who are not sure how that transition from grade 6 to year 7 is going to be impacted, because things are all over the place. I've had my year 10s this year started to study for exams, then lockdown happened, then school holidays happened, and they've just had such disrupted learning that some of them were like to me, Miss, it's just, what's the point? What's the point of me learning to study if I can't even sit down and do my exam because things are just all over the place? So that uncertainty is really impacting kids. Moreover, understanding the fact that it is impacting teachers, principals, faculty, staff, because remote learning is not easy to start adapting to overnight. I think we're getting better at it. Huge shout out to the teachers at my school who are doing a fantastic job at trying to integrate this stuff. But it is really, really hard. And I think a big part of this is, again, where do we go to seek help? Because you can come to us, we've got therapists, like I said, at schools, we've got private practices, there's places like Headspace, so many resources out there for this sort of stuff.
And support groups as well.
Yeah. Where would you find support groups?
Oh, good question. I know a really great one in Victoria, and they're doing Zoom at the moment. So if you're not in Victoria as well, it's called ARCVic, ARC Victoria, and they do some free support groups around a bunch of different, whether it's social anxiety, general anxiety. They do a mindfulness group as well, and so it is for adolescents and above. So I guess that's where that there is that barrier. It's not with children, but that can be a great place to have peers to talk to who are going through what you're going through, and have those conversations. If you are intimidated of starting off going to a practitioner, that might be a really great place to start.
I think that's great. That's a really wonderful space. We've got a question. It's more of more of uncertainty, its implications visibly affecting teachers, principals, and faculty staff. Is remote learning going to be finished anytime soon?
Your guess is
Oh.
as good as ours.
Fingers
Hopefully.
crossed.
Please let us go back to school. My kids were doing so well when we'd finally sort of integrated back. Yes, look, one part of it is going back from remote learning to real learning, but can I also say, like, then the children being able to integrate into the learning prospect, like having enough. I know last year a lot of things were modified. I know that this year things weren't as modified. So also understanding that they're under a lot of pressure to do really well from a space that's at home. And sometimes, you know, you'll have wonderful teachers who are going to try and support them the best that they can, but sometimes kids don't do so well in remote learning. And I think we sort of spoke about it a little bit earlier, but in terms of kids who are socially anxious seem to be doing great at home. You know, they don't have to be around other people. It's not as emotionally taxing for them. They are able to get through their routine, get their work done, doing fantastic. Some kids need more structure and they need to be in the classroom. So, you know, being in that space makes it so much easier for them. And, you know, learning becomes a little bit better. They feel more comfortable going and talking to the teacher, maybe than sending emails or messages. And the motivation is a little bit higher because everyone's together. But God, I hope remote learning ends soon. I hope remote everything ends soon, guys.
I think we'll see that. I think that, you know, we're going to see a push back to face-to-face learning. I have hope with that. And I guess also wanted to mention, you know, there are a lot of really tough things that have come out of this pandemic, and I think it's very important to find those supports and have these conversations. But a strength from this is that, you know, children are going to, if we can provide that support, are going to have this amazing toolbox of strategies as adults because of this experience they're having through the pandemic. So it's really tough, but if we can provide that support, I think children and adolescents are really going to have a toolbox that they can use. I always go back.
Kids are really resilient. I think we forget kids. On majority of them are pretty resilient, and I think if we can model, you know, coping mechanisms and strategies, and we can model that, things may not be as what we want them to be, but we can move through this. They will pick that up most of the time.
True.
And I guess allowing kids to feel what they feel, but kind of having faith in the fact that they're pretty resilient. They'll build those skills, or they'll come back to it. It might be a couple of months, and not expecting things to snap back to normal. And I think acknowledging it will take kids a couple months to get back into it, and, you know, re-socialize with friends and reintegrate into the classroom, and all those sorts of things will take time. But hopefully, once we don't have remote learning anymore, we won't have to go back to it, and it will just, you know, be a growth from there.
Totally agree.
That's okay. There's a question that's up. I was going to say there was a really good question before.
Was it about the uni students and studying from home?
No.
Oh, no? Okay, I don't know. We'll
this
bring it
one?
back up. This one's, I am a speech pathologist and I work working primarily with kids with disabilities. In instances where one of my kids has a meltdown in a session, for example, they lost a game and became frustrated, is it helpful for me to label their emotions for them? For example, I can see that you're feeling angry right now, or is it wrong for me to assume that I know what emotion the child is feeling at that time? Good question.
Good question.
I would say if it's pretty obvious what the child's feeling, you obviously don't want to make assumptions, but if you can see that they're very angry, I always find it really good to describe it. So say, oh, I see that you're scrunching your eyebrows, or you're holding something, you want to, you know, whatever it is they're doing that you're noticing. And then you can even ask, you can say, it looks like you're feeling angry. What do you think? Do you think, if you're ever unsure, I think it's always really good to kind of describe what you're seeing. And then see how they feel. And they might say, I am, or they might say, I'm not sure.
It's a really great way of going about it, because then it also creates that sense of the right word, agency, or that, you know, putting it back on them, and it's, you know, them by themselves trying to label it if they have the skills, but then getting that support, you know, and
I think labeling is so helpful. If they don't if they haven't learned that skill as young children, they may themselves not know that by what they're doing and the behaviors and the facial expressions that they're displaying, they may not connect the two, that this is anger. So by you kind of broaching that with them and labeling what you can see, and this, this looks like anger, like you're angry, is that right? Or do you feel frustrated? And giving them a couple of options. If you're not sure, give them a couple of options, and get them to kind of pick which one feels closest for them. And then it's kind of like explicitly teaching them, these are the things that you do that we can see. This is what the connected emotion might be for you. And then that will help them in future, rather than kind of displaying the behavior. They may be able to say to you later on down the track, oh, I'm really frustrated that I lost that game, rather than like throwing it across the room or something like that.
That's such a great point that I kind of forgot about. It's not only about labeling the words of it, but how it actually feels in your body.
Yeah.
And some children might not be able to do it, but that's a really great place to also start with, because they might not know, what does angry look like? Anxiety even. Okay, I know the word, but what does that look like? Going through
But I mean, from a therapist's point of view, when we're helping to support kids who are feeling anxious, angry, or any of these emotions, that's the first thing that we kind of do as well, right? Like, I know when I'm doing a lot of anger management work, it's around in terms of noticing what happens to your body. Do you scrunch up your fists? Do you feel your heart race? These are all let's notice what's going on, because then when you start noticing these little things, you can actually start calming yourself down before you explode. And that could be before you start having a panic attack. That could be before you actually get really angry and throw something or get in a fight or whatever it is. Learning to notice your little, almost like little things start happening before the big thing happens, before, I don't know.
The flags. I don't know what to call that.
Yeah. Your little flags, to sort of notice those things before anything happens. You can almost help to bring yourself down. It's like, I like to use a thermometer. So it's like, if you're sitting at a 5 and your 5 looks at these sort of things, you could probably bring yourself down to a 0 a lot quicker than if you're at a 10 and you're raging or, super anxious or super sad or whatever it is. So if you start doing the strategies that are put in place for you early on, you're not going to feel quite as bad.
And I also think in terms of the signs of different feelings, at least for the kids that I see, a lot of them aren't sure. So I'll go through scenarios and say, if mum says iPad time's up, what do you do? And they'll be like, I don't know. And then you have a parent come in and they'll be like, oh gosh, he yells a lot. And then the kid's kind of like, I do. And then you see that help from the parent is really helpful for a kid to be able to identify their own signals as well. So it's really good to, I always try and collaborate with parents, because they are the experts in a different way. We may, have studied this, but they're kind of the experts of their kids. So who better to get information from than parents as well? Yeah,
absolutely. We've got another question. How do you encourage young people to speak with parents when they're feeling down?
I guess kind of what we were saying before about, at least this is what my opinion, I think normalizing all emotions is really, really important. So kind of talking to, I get really angry too. I get angry when, and then you can even talk to what upsets you. Normalize that it happens to everyone. It happens across the lifespan, and it's okay to feel this way. It's completely fine. And I think that's such a good place to start with kids, to know what I'm feeling is okay. I think that's a really good place to start.
I think that's really true for teenagers as well. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that would work really well, because sometimes if you ask, how are you going? We do it as well. How are you? Yeah. I'm fine. I'm okay. But that's not the place. So being able to show them that, I'm having these feelings too, validating, okay, this is very normal. Yeah. That's a great place to possibly start that conversation.
It's true. You know what I've noticed though, as adults and as we've gotten older, and I don't know, as someone who is now in adulthood officially, I feel, I don't know, when do you officially hit adulthood? Anyway, as someone who's finally feels like a proper adult, I've come to the realization that as we get older, sometimes we do tend to pick up on these habits. And I know it's better to do it later than never, But for example, even with my friends, being able to set boundaries and be like, hey, I'm actually not feeling great. Or like, this is like, we've started to verbalize how we're feeling so much more often. And I don't know whether this was just something as being, I don't know, within our cohort and being psychs. And it's just really great with your therapist friends. Therapists are great at being like, oh, I'm feeling not so great today, to their other therapists. And we're very good at verbalizing how we're feeling. But the fact that we were doing that for a very long time, even when we were studying, like encouraged me to be like, oh, actually, you know what? We're allowed to say more than I'm just fine. Like we're allowed to actually verbalize how I'm feeling. So I think that in itself speaks volumes about the fact that when you're in an environment and it's normalized to use language about how you're feeling and what's going on for you, and that you know, whatever it is, you're more likely to like reduce the stigma, the shame, the guilt around expressing those things. And whether if you're a child, you know, a toddler, whether if you're an adolescent or you're a teenager, being able to encourage the fact, and, you know, mean the fact that you can come and talk to me about anything.
And then when you do that sorry.
No, you go, Alana. On a roll.
I was just going to say, and then when you do that, it's so important to just be able to listen as well. I feel like a lot of young people and people in general, they're not sharing information to have someone solve the problem. And sometimes it's actually counterproductive because, you know, if you're saying, if a child's saying, I'm really stressed or feeling sad, if you go, oh, just go for a walk, then they're going to shut down and they're going to go, yeah, okay, they're not really listening to me. They don't really understand how I feel. It's a lot worse than just going for a walk and feeling better. So sometimes it's not about trying to solve it at all. That's not what they want. It's just being there for them to feel like I can talk to my parents and they're just going to sit there and listen. And that's all that's going to happen. I can share it with them and they're just, I can talk to them about stuff. So I think, I think that's normalizing and then, just listening.
Allowing actually for that space. Well, you know what I say to some of my parents, and I say to my kids, I say to anyone who is wanting to communicate with someone else, full stop, even amongst your friendship groups, I think one of the best ways to set this boundary is to be like, hey, you know, when your kid comes up to you, and it's like something's not feeling quite right, you can always put that option in front of them. Do you need to vent or do you need my advice today? And if they say, I just need to vent today, mum or dad, then let them just vent. You don't need to give advice at the end of it. If they say, no, you know what, today I need advice on something, then, you know, that active listening switches a little bit and you can provide advice. And I think that way they're not walking away feeling frustrated, like you're trying to solve everything. You're not feeling like you're not doing enough for them. But either way, like open communications is like super important. Just verbalizing what you need, right?
And it creates that safe space as well of, oh, my feelings aren't a problem to be fixed. Because I think if we continuously try to fix everything and we want our kids to feel better for the best of reasons, no parent likes to see their child in distress. But I think sometimes if you're trying to change that feeling every single time, that sometimes gets internalized of, oh, my sadness is a problem for mum or dad. My sadness, you know, is something to be fixed. I can't feel this way. And it takes away that safe space of I can just feel what I'm feeling, and my parents will be, or my parents, my psych, whoever they're talking to, will be able to hold that. So yeah, just, you know, if you want to vent, that's a really nice way of kind of seeing what the child is after.
Yeah, because otherwise what we start seeing is things like kids apologizing, or like even teenagers apologizing for how they're feeling. Like, I'm sorry that I'm so anxious, or I'm so sorry that I'm like depressed. Like, no, don't be sorry. You're feeling how you're feeling. Or we start seeing things like the internalization of feelings. We start seeing things like, it's not okay to be okay, which is not the message that we want to be sending out. I had a 5-year-old last year who like threw a tantrum on telehealth and like told his mom, he's like, I don't need to be fixed, nothing, like, you know, feeling like something is a problem. And having to, like, you know, work through that, because, you know, imagine being that old and feeling like something needs to be fixed about you. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be fixed, but just working through stuff so that you don't feel so bad.
And just quickly on that as well, I think there's a misconception that our base level is happy as an emotion. Like we're feeling happy, like that is the level that we're not happy is a heightened emotion over like a base level. So that kind of, we have to get back to feeling happy. again, it's kind of how we've grown up in society and how I grew up. And, if you're feeling upset, we have to change upset or sad to happy, not just, getting through the day or just existing, which is enough.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a bit of a misconception that the only state that we can be that is normal is happy, and it's not our normal state. So I think that change in mindset is something that we all have to work on, especially adults, so we don't kind of pass that on to the kids that we work with or to, our kids. Just feeling the range of human emotion, not that happy is what you have to be every single minute of every day.
Absolutely. We've got one last question. How about uni students studying from home? Everything's online, including lab work. They're not feeling very excited about doing labs online. Yes, I'm seeing
Tough
this.
one.
Okay, anyone studying online right now, just it is hectic, would not have wanted to be in that position. I mean, some of us did our internships online last year, and that was already stressful. Especially, what I'm seeing, teenagers who are going into university right now, there's a lot of uncertainty again, but also it's stressful because it's hard enough to navigate uni on a good day and when you're on campus and everything's accessible to you, let alone when you're online and all of a sudden learning has changed for you again. And the mode of learning's changed, everything's brand new. And if we want to add another layer to that, if you're an international student, you come here from overseas and you are, doing remote learning, A, learning's different in Australia. B, you're not just navigating university life, you're navigating living in Australia, which is language, culture, food, resources. Everything is so much to take on board. And I think if you're a university student and you are struggling with uni right now, be kind to yourself, because I do not know one kid right now who has not dropped either a paper, or who hasn't deferred maybe a unit, or isn't feeling a bit anxious about things, or hasn't extended the degree by some little amount. It's not the worst thing in the world if you are needing more time right now to do that, because it is very, very difficult to be studying online and very difficult to find your motivation, because things aren't as exciting as they can normally be.
And I guess important to say that there's...
Ooh.
You go. I've talked over you so many times.
Well, it's difficult to pick up on cues online, isn't it? I was going to mention, I teach adults online, teaching them psychology, and even for them, it's really demotivating and hard. So if adults are having a hard time, it's going to be hard for younger adults and adolescents as well. And I think it can be very isolating. So being kind to yourself, trying to find self-care that works for you, but more importantly, self-compassion. Don't, if you can't get that work done on, you've created a to-do list and you're not able to get anything done on that day, there's a reason, your body needs to rest. So listening to your body as well, and trying to create, hopefully, have a support system and can maybe form study groups via Zoom if you're not too Zoom fatigued, and having those conversations with your friends. But you know what, this is really hard. If you can even talk to your tutors about it, and your teachers, I'm really struggling with this. I can't motivate. I can't get up and do this work at home. Is there anything, any strategies you have that can help? That can be really helpful.
And knowing that universities have support out there, even if you're not aware of it, call up your university and find out what is available, because they will have telehealth available for with mental health practitioners. More often than not, they'll have other types of services that can get you linked in, because sometimes you might not have had that opportunity to form relationships and friendships yet, because the year has been a bit difficult. And that's okay, because we've got things in place. There's things like Study Melbourne. There's resources out there in general. If you are a uni student struggling with this, email us. We'll send you out resources. There is so much.
I think as well. Sorry, go.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh no, I was just going to say as well, I think, Anusha, you mentioned it before, structuring your degree differently, defer a subject, take a lower study load if you need to. If you have electives, do them during the summer or winter periods. You don't have to do the full load of the uni semester that time. Most degrees, there are a few that are really structured and you have to go by it, but most degrees will have some flexibility. And if now isn't the time where you can use that flexibility to your advantage, there's no other time. Like now is a fantastic time to use that and take some pressure off yourself. You don't want to overload yourself and kind of set yourself up to experience so much and have so much going on that you can't process it properly. And it's kind of setting yourself up for failure in a sense that because there's a lot, there's a lot happening. So why put that extra pressure on yourself when you can restructure it a little bit, or you can take a lower study load and feel better about yourself as you're doing it, and then pick up, if it takes you an extra 6 months or a year, in the grand scheme of things, it's a small portion of your life. And if you can get through your uni degree feeling happier, or at least
not
less stressed,
at
least stressed, it's better for you, and you're probably likely to have a better outcome too in terms of your grades. If your grades are something you're really stressed about and worried about, taking on that extra study load just to get it finished in the 3 years may not be the best move for you. It might be taking an extra year, but really getting that reward of your grades and getting through it, learning more because you've had more capacity to actually take in the information.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to mention with that is, I think, and I've seen this with even my friends as well, is that the idea of not, deferring, it can make us feel like we're a failure in some way.
Yeah.
So trying to change that, the language, the way we think about it. No, you're not a failure. You're still going to get through that degree. It's doing it at a space where you are enjoying it and you can do it to your best capabilities. So just reminding, and if you I guess if you have friends or family as well through this, telling them that as well, and that you're allowed to. There's a reason it's there, and it's there too, so that you can use them. And sorry, Alana, I noticed.
I can't even remember what I was going to say. But just going off what you said, I think right now a lot of people, everyone feels sad, everyone feels lonely, those big sort of things. But there's so many other things, so many other ways that this pandemic and lockdown is affecting us. And it's things like motivation and just joy in life and things that we don't often consider, but then go, hang on, why can't I get this stuff done today? I was able to do this not that long ago, and now I can't get through stuff in the day. I'm distracted. I don't want to, and I just can't find that motivation. And I guess for uni students especially, they're going to be feeling those feelings of confusion and just not getting why they can't get these things done. But we're all feeling that way, and I think we really need to be kind to ourselves right now, because no one predicted this. There's I guess, big studies.
We've never been through this before, hey?
Yeah. And so we don't know how to respond. We're just going through the motions as they come. I think what you said, Manisha, before about self-compassion and just treating yourself kindly is so important, because, there's no sort of rule book for how we should be feeling through this. And whatever you're feeling is fine. It's fine. And if you're struggling, you're struggling. If you're doing okay, awesome. I haven't met anyone that's like that, but awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
No, but it's true. I actually, on that note of like, it's okay for you to feel how you're feeling. The number of students in this particular lockdown that we've gone through that have been like, oh, but Miss, how are you handling things? I'm going to just put this out there. Just because we're therapists does not mean that we're not feeling this lockdown. Like we are feeling it. Like there are some days where I want to sit down and be like, yeah, I get you, kiddo. Like I am also demotivated on some days. And there are some days where I don't want to get out of bed either. But like Alana's saying, we're all going through this. And if anything, we understand. We understand how you feel, and we can relate to it. And you know what? We can work through this with you. So if you are struggling to do this by yourself, you don't have to. There are people like Cass and Manisha and Alana like me out there that are happy to support you through this time, whether if you're, again, 5 years old to any age, because we are working across a lifespan. That's our job. And, for the most part, our expertise as well. And we're here to support, and we're not scary. Look,
no.
I get that comment a lot as well. Kids will come in and be like, Miss, you're not so scary as I thought you'd be. I'm like, yeah, literally nothing terrifying about me.
I've had people be like, oh, I thought you were going to be really old and an old guy, and there's going to be like a couch. And I was like, oh my goodness, just sit on the beanbag and let's have a chat.
That's it. Just like
Yeah.
come in, we'll have a conversation. That's all that we're doing. It's the
Yeah.
same as what we're doing here today. We're having conversations, and that's it. There's nothing big and scary. We're not gonna sit you down and I don't know what the conception around psychs are anymore. TV displays a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and then in TV it's that's the person sitting down in the chair, and then the psychologist being like, "So how do you feel?" But it's all about
writing.
having conversation. Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
you put it really nicely, Anushka. It's just having a conversation and really listening to that, and the way you put it together was really nice. And I think if anyone can, if you can go back and listen to what Anushka said. That's a really nice way to have that conversation with someone, asking how they're feeling, and then be like, you know what, this is really hard for me too. Yeah. I can't even, I can't get up and do this work, but, we'll get through this together. Kind of, you put it really nicely. I like that.
We're your personal cheerleaders. That's how I see it in my head. I'm like, we can push you through. We'll believe in you until you learn to believe in yourself. That's it.
Yes.
That's all being a psych is.
Yeah.
Here to support you.
Yeah.
Well, with that in mind, I think we've covered all the questions. Great conversation, guys. Thank you so much for everyone who's logged in live. Thank you to everyone who is watching this recorded. If you do have any additional questions or comments, you can find us at respective different places. You can find me at umeedpsychology.com.au. I think that's my website, and my Instagram handle is @umeedpsychology. So feel free to message me if you have any questions about stuff or you want to get in contact about things. Alana also runs a wonderful page around mental health support. Do you want to give a shout out to your page?
Yeah, it's Insight Your Mind, and we've got a little underscore at the end.
Come and find us because we do give lots of tips and tricks. I don't know whether if anyone else wants to. No, cool. Okay. Yeah, but if you have questions directed at Manisha,
I'm the public sector, no private clients for me. So
well, if you have any questions for any of us, feel free to send them through. And yeah, we're more than happy to answer any questions and provide support. Oh, cute.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.